If you want to learn an easy way to paint a realistic strawberry in acrylic paints, then this is the video for you. I've broken the process down into 7 simple steps, making it nice and easy to follow. I also have a full-length tutorial available on my Patreon where you can paint along with me in real time with full step-by-step instructions, as well as reference images and all of the paint colours that I used. When you join me on Patreon, you'll also get instant access to my entire library of full-length art tutorials. The first step is to paint the shadow underneath the strawberry. This helps to make the strawberry look more three-dimensional and adds more realism to the painting. The colour of your shadow will depend on the colour of your background. I'm painting onto a white background, so I'll be using various shades of grey paint. If you're painting onto a coloured background, you'll want to use darker shades of that colour for your shadow. The darkest paint of the shadow will be directly underneath the strawberry, then you'll want to gradually blend this outwards into your background colour, so I'm blending the dark grey into white as I move further away from the strawberry. It also helps to add a little bit of red into the darkest parts of the shadow, as this gives the impression that the colour of the strawberry is being reflected onto the surface. In step 2, we can fill in the red base colour for the strawberry. You'll want to use a bright, medium shade of red. Use this shade to paint the entire strawberry. We don't need to worry about adding any details just yet. I find that it helps to lightly draw the outline of the strawberry onto your canvas first, although you can paint it freehand if you prefer. Now we can begin to add shape and form to the strawberry to make it look more three-dimensional. To do this, you'll need to mix a slightly lighter and a slightly darker shade of red paint. Use the lighter shade of red to paint in some highlights onto the top side of the strawberry. Start out subtle, then gradually add more white to your mixture if you'd like to make the highlights brighter. It also helps to add a little bit of yellow paint to the highlight mixture to create warm highlights and mimic sunlight. I highly recommend using a reference photo when painting strawberries, as the highlights and shadows aren't always where you expect them to be. I always upload the reference images that I use to my full-length tutorials on Patreon. You can also take your own reference photos or paint from life using a real strawberry. Now we can use the darker shade of red to paint the shadows onto the underside of the strawberry. Have a look at your reference image and roughly mark out where the shadows should go. In my reference image, the shadows are on the underside of the strawberry and just beneath the leaves. You can then use the base red colour to blend the darker paint into the rest of the strawberry. To add a little bit more realism to the painting, you can also paint a subtle reflection from the surface onto the underside of the strawberry. This reflection is usually slightly lighter and cooler than the colour of the shadow. This step is completely optional and it can be a little bit trickier to get right, so don't worry if you'd rather skip it, your strawberry will still look great. In step 4, we'll be painting little dots across the strawberry. These dots will become the shadowed sections around each of the seeds, which we'll add later on. For these dots, you'll want to use paint that's a shade darker than the section you're painting on. So in the highlighted areas, I'm using the base red colour, then gradually switching to darker shades of red as I move towards the shadowed areas, with the darkest shades used over the darkest shadows. Now we can add the seeds to our strawberry. Take a dark yellow paint, such as yellow oxide, and use a very small paintbrush to paint a tiny seed into the centre of each dot. The seeds can vary in size and shape. I find that a small oval usually works well. Just make sure you leave some of the red dot visible around each seed. As you move into the more shadowed areas of the strawberry, darken your yellow paint slightly with a little bit of brown. This next step is my favourite part of painting strawberries, painting the shiny highlights. To make the strawberry look extra shiny, we can paint that distinctive bright highlight around the seeds. Mix a little bit of red and yellow into some white paint to create a very light shade, then use a small paintbrush to paint the highlights around the dots. In the brightest areas, the highlight may go all the way around the dots, but as you move further down, it may only appear on one side. So make sure you're always referring to your reference image so you know exactly where to place these highlights. Continue adding these highlights to all of the areas that are catching the light. You can also use pure white paint to add the brightest highlights where the strawberry is catching the most direct light. If you're painting the reflected light on the underside of the strawberry, you can also add a few highlights there as well. These highlights should be much more subtle as they're created by reflected light rather than direct light. Use a shade that is only slightly lighter than the area you're painting on, and make sure it's a cool toned colour. If you'd like to soften these highlights and make them a bit less obvious, you can use the colour that you used to paint the shadow. To finish your strawberry painting, the only thing left to paint is the leaves. Mix 3 shades of green paint, a light shade, a mid-tone and a dark shade, for the highlights, mid-tones and shadows. Adding a tiny bit of red to your greens can help to make them look much more natural. Block in all of the darkest areas of the leaves using the darkest shade of green. These will be the areas where the leaves overlap and cast shadows. Then use the lighter shades of green to fill in the rest of the leaves. This creates the basic shapes and we can add more detail and contrast later on. Use this same technique to paint the stalk to complete the first layer of the leaves. Now we can paint another layer over the top of the leaves. This time we'll darken the shadows and brighten the highlights to add more depth and contrast. Paint one leaf at a time, brightening the edges and areas that are closest to the light source. Continue this process with all of the leaves as well as the stalk. And that's how you paint a realistic strawberry in 7 simple steps. I hope you found this video helpful. Don't forget to check out the full-length tutorial if you'd like to learn how to paint this strawberry in more detail. Thanks for watching!